importantly, why Ashley has the position she has is, and we work with people in around the university in travel, international programs, Center for Global Engagement, also in information technology services, is to try and support FSU travelers, whether students or faculty members who are traveling on university business internationally. And you're going to find out some more details on that. But what we feel is that support is an important part of our engagement with the world. And by having high quality support, we can say yes when someone wants to do something rather than saying no, but we can say yes, and here's some advice, and here's some information, here's some services. And so we're going to start with Bill Hunkapiller from Information Technology Services to talk about cybersecurity and information technology best practices when you're traveling internationally. Then we're going to be going on just to give you an overview. Ashley will talk a bit about the overall policy structure and faculty and staff travel. Then the Center for Global Engagement, Cindy, will talk about their support of students in exchange programs. And then international programs will talk about their support. And then Ashley will wrap up with some independent student travel. And then we'll have questions and discussion. So thank you all for coming. And thank you to our presenters. And why don't we go ahead, Bill? Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Bill Hunkapiller. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for FSU. I've been here it'll be 7 years in September, and absolutely the best job I've ever had in my life. I love what I do every day. I also teach in CCI, which I will go ahead and tell on myself. My students love me because I make them, at least for the remote classes, they have to have their camera on or they lose points. I can't get mine to work today, so I'm gonna have to ding myself. So I apologize, but yeah, just talk a little bit about travel and cybersecurity. So who's a target? Well, you are. Basically anyone that is traveling on business, not just on business, but anyone that's traveling, academics, certainly researchers, any employee of an organization that has access to sensitive data, and I'm a big traveler. We love to travel. Last year, when I go to Canada, when I fly into Canada, I take a lot less concern than when I'm flying to Africa. And so you have to really think about where you're traveling. Is it listed as a country of concern? If it is a country of concern, you're likely to be more targeted. So that's when you really need to start taking into consideration more of the preparation and controls and awareness. So you can go to the next one, please. So especially if you go to a country of concern, what can you expect? First of all, assume that your device is already compromised. If you go under that auspice, you will be much more careful with the information you share and how you share it. In a lot of the places that I've worked, this is my first, well, really my second foray, I guess, into higher education. I worked for the Mayo Clinic for a number of years, but most of my career's been in insurance, reinsurance, and we would do international travel. And when folks would go to some of the countries in concern, our devices would get seized. And that can certainly happen. There's not much you can do about it, but they will inspect it, they will seize it, and in some situations, they will put nice little things on there to see what you're doing. The other thing is some countries will block certain search engines, social media, email, websites, because they're controlling what the population in that country is able to see. So that's what you should expect when you're going to these countries for sure. Now, the next one is, what do you do before you travel? Well, the first thing that I recommend, if you can avoid it, like when I go to Canada, I'm bringing my personal device. I'm pretty cool with the Canadians. I go there every year. I'm not worried about it, right? But when I'm traveling to Africa, I'm going to be a little bit more careful about what I bring over there. So if you can bring a sanitized device, and we'll talk about that in the next slide, that is the best thing that you can do. If you do bring your own device, you want to back up any information on it in case you lose it. If you have any sensitive data on it, you want to remove it. Okay. You want to encrypt the system. So if it gets into the wrong hands, it's going to be hard for them to get the data off of it. If a nation state takes it, will they be able to, beat the encryption? Yeah, but is the local hacker going to be able to do it? Probably not. It's not worth their time. The anti-theft bags and RFID blocking pocket that you put your device in is good. As you should always update your antivirus and your systems using a privacy screen, and use strong passwords. There's a video that I show, and it's hilarious. It's this guy who's a comedian. He's talking about passwords and the internet, and it's always, capitalize the first letter, a number at the end, and then a special character. So, it's my dog's name, 1 exclamation point, right? So that's and configure multi-factor authentication for sure. So now the next slide is, what's a sanitized laptop? It's basically a dummy machine. There's nothing on it. It's encrypted. You're going to use a virtual private network to connect to other networks. So your data on the device is encrypted. The VPN encrypts your data in transit. It's not going to store any passwords, or biometrics. Like on your phone, when I open my phone, I want to go to my bank. It looks at my face and it lets me in. You don't want to have that when you're traveling to certain locations. And in fact, when I was working at the Mayo Clinic, we did some early biometric. This was 25 years ago. And, you can bypass biometrics. If it's a thumbprint, we found that the thumb doesn't actually have to be attached to the body to be able to bypass it. And certainly the scary aspects of what's happened is increased over the years. And you want to limit that you can't just plug any USB drive into it. And that USB drive should be encrypted. There's ways to have that laptop only allow a certain USB drive to connect to it. And that helps you from somebody else trying to put something on your device or take something off of it. All right. When you're abroad, first, turn off location services. You don't need to advertise where you are, where you're going. Definitely turn off the auto join function on your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. In fact, you should have them turned off at most, if at all possible. If you're using public Wi-Fi, I would advise not to, unless it's a known connection. It's very easy to set up Wi-Fi's without a password and sniff the information that's going across of it. If you use, my dog's name as your password in the United States, you might want to use your cat's name when you're traveling across the pond. And you definitely don't want to use the same password on all of your websites. We had an incident recently where a student was using a username and password, the same one on FSU that they used on Facebook, Twitter, their bank, etc. And the bad actor got the compromised credentials and attempted to log into FSU with them. Well, they did. And the Duo push went to the student. And what did the student do? They just have what's called MFA fatigue. They just pressed yes, even though they weren't logging in. The bad actor got in, changed their financial aid direct deposit. They're also an OPS employee. They changed their OPS direct deposit. Then they went into their email and deleted the notifications that come from FSU saying, we changed your financial aid deposit, you changed your please confirm. Now we were able to catch it before the distribution occurred, but when you press that Duo button to log in, make sure you're actually logging in and that it says you're somewhere near the area that it says you're in. Don't leave your laptop in the hotel. If you go back, I'm sorry, I still had a couple things on that one. The safes in the hotels are not safe. There are bypass mechanisms to get into them. Folks in the industry know them. And especially in a nation-based attack or a country of concern, they'll absolutely come in there, open the safe, put a USB drive in, and compromise your account. Obviously, use of a privacy screen. And here's the biggest thing, and this isn't just for when you're traveling abroad. Don't put on social media that, hey, I'm going to the beach for 2 weeks and nobody's going to be at my house, so come break in and steal all my stuff, right? Um, I have nothing on social media other than LinkedIn, because I'm a paranoid individual because of my job. And I would encourage you to be very cautious with what you post. So, all right. Now, when you get back home, and that's not my home, but it's somebody's home. If you brought your personal device, scan it for malware, scan it for infections. I would go as far as to say, I'm going to reimage the whole device, do a factory reset, and add everything back onto it. Change passwords, because they could have been compromised when you're overseas. I keep my credit frozen, and I would advise everybody to do that unless you're actively going to get credit. But check your credit, check your bank accounts, check your credit cards. And then now you can say, hey, I just went to, you know, overseas to a country of concern, had a great time, cultural experience, amazing food, and it's great to be back in the USA, right? And is that all I had? That may be all I had. Or do I have another great slide? Oh, so these are some resources that you can go to. The FCC's got tips for travelers. There's FSU Global's got their international travel site, cybercrime, fight cybercrime. We also have links on our site in ITS on travel. And we've also got a program through research compliance. So when a researcher is traveling, we have those sanitized laptops that a researcher can get and say, hey, I'm going to Iran or Cuba or China or Russia or wherever, and they want a laptop that is sanitized. We've worked out a program. We did it when Diana Key was here. I think she's retired now, which happy for her. So we work with Mary Seacrest on that. And I'm going to attempt to expand that program so anyone, faculty or staff who are traveling on business to a country of concern or to that they can get a sanitized laptop. But there's some good resources on here, and I think that's all I had. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything, or if you think of something later. I know it's surprising. There's only one Hunkapillar that works at FSU. Type in Hunk and you'll find me, right? So
Good. Thank you, Bill.
Bill, can you just speak a little bit to the, I already forgot what it's called. The thing you can get when you're traveling to help you with the Duo?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the bookstore sells a fob. It's like a key fob, kind of similar to the things that we have that open up the parking garages and whatnot and lift the gates up. And you can use that instead of bringing your device, because your device may not work in a foreign country, but the fob will. The only thing you have to watch out for is there are certain countries that have sanctions against them from the Office of Foreign Asset Control, or OFAC. And it is Cuba, Iran, Syria, parts of Ukraine that have been occupied by Russia. I can't remember all of them, but it's actually illegal to take that technology to those countries. It's a import-export sort of a deal, international. What is it? The ITAR, International Trade and Arms. But yeah, you can pick up the thing from the bookstore. I think it's $25 and use that to if you're not going to use your phone.
Thank you. Yeah, I bought one of those last summer. Ended up not needing it because my phone worked when I was going to Pakistan. The phone worked fine for getting those codes for the dual factor authentication. And also bought a Chromebook. The nice thing about the Office 365 is most of our things are available through the web now, or email files, etc. So you don't have to have any local files in most cases. So the Chromebook worked out really well too. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you. But thanks for those resources too, Bill. I think people can kind of plan ahead to think about, how they can minimize their risk by some of the things you're talking about of loss. And with the information technology, our losses might include, all your photos on your phone or, all your contact information. So it's kind of a very direct and immediate potential loss with taking these devices internationally.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. It's the confidentiality of the data, it's the availability of the data, but it's also the integrity. I hear from researchers often say, well, all my data is public, so I don't care if it's secure or not. Well, if somebody goes in and changes the data and you're not aware of it, and you have results from research based on data that's been manipulated, then then your findings can be completely wrong. So, if you have the sensitive data, you got to protect it. So
yeah, very good. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, let's go to Ashley for a bit of context and then focus on faculty and staff travel.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go over our university-wide kind of structure and policies that center around international engagements and more specifically around risk. So as many of you know, in the International Advisory Committee, we do have the International Travel Safety and Risk Advisory Council. That is a university-wide council. There's representatives from the Office of Travel, from CGE and international programs, the provost office, as well as compliance and ethics. And a faculty member. That advisory council really informs a lot of the work that I do as the director of international travel safety and risk. We conquer fun topics like international travel registry systems and what are our standards for insurance, what should be our standards for orientation across the board. But it's a really essential and key entity in creating this university-wide consistency for international travel. As part of that, we were able to obtain CISI insurance. Now, we have a couple of different policies, and I won't bore you with those details, but I think the important thing to understand is that the provost office does have CISI insurance. There's plans that cover all university travelers. We do maintain separate ones, so their international program staff will talk about their plans, but they maintain the same standard of coverage. And I think that's essential to talk about when you're looking at medical and security evacuation coverage. But to note, this is not travel insurance. So this is not the people you call if you lost your bag or if your flight was delayed. It's really not meant to be that, but it does cover medical security evacuation. I'll talk a little bit in the next slide about business travel and why it's so important to follow the steps and concur to make sure you get this. But I think it's important to note that we do have this umbrella policy so that all of our travelers that are going abroad on FSU related travel are covered. As a part of that kind of packaging and product, we have recently entered into a contract with Crisis 24. They are an excellent vendor who provides incident alerts. They provide country briefings and intelligence, and they also run our travel registry. So if any of you have traveled internationally since September, your flight information would have been loaded into Crisis 24. Depending on your location, you might have received an alert. We currently have those alerts set to a very, very high level. So you're not going to get an alert as a faculty or staff member because the bus route was closed or delayed or there's extra rain. We really set it to be those emergency alerts like a terrorist attack, a bombing, something major. So Crisis 24 is our new vendor, and we're very excited to have them on board. The other thing we do from a university-wide approach, and again, you'll hear each unit talk a bit more about this in their presentations, but we're really well connected with a network of professionals and experts throughout the field, thought leaders, intel providers. Some of those include OSAC, that's the Overseas Advisory Council through the U.S. Department of State. We have a lot of great access to analysts, crime reports through them, and the ability to send an email with questions. We are also connected to Pulse International. I'm very proud to state that Florida State University has 3 full-time dedicated international health, safety, and security professionals. Not every university in the U.S. has that. So I think it's great we have two that are in international programs, and then myself in the Office of the Provost. Pulse International is the professional organization for individuals like that, so we can all collaborate. What are you doing at your university? What am I doing back at my university? Do you have travelers in a location? What are you hearing on the ground? It's a great way to benchmark and keep up to date with our peers in the field. FSU also participates in other organizations like the Forum on Education Abroad, NAFSA, all of these that set standards on risk and how we should approach international risk management. The last bullet points there are our international policies for international travel and risk. I've hyperlinked the faculty and staff as well as the student. I'll be sure to drop these slides in the Teams group, and we can send it out via email so you can click on those links. But a lot of the information we're talking about today has been formalized in some of those policies when it just comes to our general approach to international risk and international risk management. One important thing, and I like to talk about this with the student policy, we'll talk about it a little bit more, is it does a lot to set our general procedure as we approach different types of international travel. And I think it's important to talk about the main categories. So the top level is organized. We'll talk about organized travel when we look at the Center for Global Engagement with our global exchanges, international programs, but that's anytime an FSU individual is taking that step of organizing the travel. We have a higher duty of care and do a due diligence review, and you'll hear each unit kind of talk about what that looks like for that higher level of organization, right? We also have what's called supported. That tends to happen more with me if someone's going abroad on international research. I'll talk about that a bit later in the presentation. It's how we support students who do non-FSU related programs. That is more of a, we're here to support you. We don't do the same high level due diligence review and it provides some of the services for those independent experiences because they are supported. And then the last category is promoted and communicated. You'll see in our policy, if you're sharing opportunities that are not FSU programs, just that you communicate that transparency with students, that it's not FSU vetted, it's not a program through international programs or through global exchanges, so that they know to do their own risk review of that information. Next, I'm going to talk a bit about business travel, and hopefully, there we go, the slide will advance. It is super, super important if you are traveling on any sort of FSU travel that you get a Concur travel request into the system. You should have that travel request approved pre-departure. It's, as many of you know, it's how you do your international travel attestation form. It's how you get, official approval for some of the budget expenditures. But it is very important that you do that travel request process and that you actually do your international flight bookings in the system. We even encourage you to do a no-cost travel authorization. And the reason for that is I use the Concur system and those bookings when I'm looking to enroll individuals in the CISI insurance, right? So I'll talk about this on the next slide as well, but if you don't have a travel request or an international booking through Concur, then it's impossible for me to tell if you're going to Bora Bora for personal pleasure and leisure, or if it's a business trip. Are you in Bora Bora? It makes it hard for me to identify when one of our travelers have been impacted. So it's super important to use Concur and to follow those policies and procedures to book. It's also important to comply with, other policies regarding technology and information. You heard from Bill Hunkapiller about, ITS, but export control, information security. Those are other things that are defined in our policies that are really important for faculty and staff when they travel for business. The policy also defines communication. So we ask faculty and staff who are going abroad to have some accessible means of communication, a way that we can get into contact with them. I understand some of our faculty and staff are on remote placements in international waters. Is there a sat phone or some way we can communicate in case of an emergency? But we do encourage you to continue to monitor your official FSU email. That's how you'll get those important intel alerts from Crisis 24, and to establish some means of communication where we can, reach out to you in case of an emergency. I'm going to snap to the next slide. And again, about that CISI insurance, as long as you have something in Concur that is dictated that you're on business travel, it's an umbrella policy. So you don't have to enroll each trip. I strongly encourage that you pre-enroll. A lot of times when you're traveling, you like that peace of mind of having an ID card. You can show it if you need to use it. It has great numbers on it and resources. And they also will give you a visa letter, which I know sometimes faculty and staff need if they're going to do research in a place like, Europe. Maybe they need to show they have insurance that meets a certain requirement. So I do strongly encourage pre-enrolling. It's not required. Again, as long as you have something approved in Concur and you follow that policy, you are insured. But I just think it gives a lot of peace of mind. So feel free to reach out and contact me. I have a link you can use to pre-enroll if you're going abroad for international travel. The other thing is to log into Crisis 24. We ask if you are going abroad for a long period of time that you register personal side travel. So if I'm doing a research project in Germany, but I plan on going over the weekend to France, we ask that you include that simply to help us identify if you are or are not impacted by a serious incident. I promise this is not FSU looking to be Big Brother. We're just hoping to help you and understand if you might be in a location that's had a terrorist attack or a bombing. I think a great recent example is Israel, knowing if we had anyone on the ground in Israel that might have been impacted. We look to this information to kind of get an idea as we're getting started with our response. The last thing I wanted to mention, and again, we can send out the link, is that we do have a Canvas pre-departure site with all of these materials. It goes through some FAQs. It has some bullet points. You can all individually enroll, so it's not something I control. I don't have to give you permission to join it. But if you go to the faculty and staff website, it's linked. You click on it, and you can review all the up-to-date information. I am working closely with the Office of Compliance and Ethics to make sure that we get this Canvas site updated with information like what we heard recently from Export Control and from Robert Large about the International Travel Attestation Form, like where do I click to find more information about ITS, where should I go for Export Control. So I expect that will become even more robust as kind of a one-stop location for all that really important information. So that's what I had for business travel, and I am going to pass it along to our FSU Global Exchanges.
Hello, everyone. You can go to the next slide. We have about 45 international partners abroad in 20 different countries. So we've worked really hard over the last few years to set up a process that incorporates safety throughout the initial discussion of the partner all the way through the final agreement. And then Leanne will take over and then talk about what we do to ensure more support and safety for students that are outbound. So we have an internal working group called the CGE Provost Administrative Team, and we work together or individually to identify potential exchange partners. But the key thing is that the first thing that is needed to be done is to look at the travel advisory level for the country in which the partner is located. So if it's not a U.S. State Department 1 or a level 2, there's no need to meet with anyone. There's no need if a faculty came forward with an idea and we know that it's a level 3, then there's no need to meet and talk about the exchange because our requirement is right away, it's a level 1 or 2 for the safety of having students there. And if it's a 3 or 4, needless to say, we don't move ahead with an agreement. Then so those are the two pieces. These are just the criteria, but those two are the ones that pertain to safety. We also look at accreditation. We also look in classes in English, but those two parts, the advisory levels, acceptable and not acceptable, are what we first look at. And then if once it passes that it's a 1 or a 2, then the next thing that we do is we write up an explanation of why we're proposing this partner. And we have to explain why the institution and the location would be of interest to FSU students. And we also then go to Ashley in her role as travel safety risk, and we ask her to drill down more in her resources, even though, let's say, it may be in a country like Italy that's a 1, maybe the city we've identified would have some things that we would need to take into consideration, that, you know, very high crime, etc. She would give us that feedback before we move ahead with the exchange. So then when we move to the actual exchange agreement, we also have a few things in there built in for safety. In the actual agreement signed by Steve McDowell as the assistant provost representing FSU, and whoever the signatory is to for the other partner, they've agreed that each university, Florida State and the partner, will provide pre-departure and arrival information and visa, insurance, information on housing, and all other types of program related assistance to the outbound and inbound groups. So that just gives another level of assurance that our students, when they arrive there, will get arrival information. And we also provide arrival information to ours that are incoming. And then we also make sure to say that all students at either campus will have access to the health and fitness facilities, academic counseling, and advising. And then we also say that we ask for the emergency notification saying that if either institution becomes aware that a student has a problem, that the host institution agrees to notify the home immediately. So that's really key in getting people to agree to do that, and maybe increasingly a little more challenging now with GDPR in Europe. Some countries are reluctant to do this. We are still putting it in the agreements as an expectation. And then also on the actual agreement that's signed, we also request the name and the contact information and the phone number for the person who we can contact for day-to-day issues about exchange issues, including a 24/7 emergency phone number. So that's the agreement part, the process, and then how we incorporate safety into that. And now Leanne will talk about the next part.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Cindy. Yes, so once the agreements are in place, we have students applying, ready to go on exchanges, then the processes before, during, and when they return abroad related to risk we've outlined here. Key among that is our 2 required pre-departure meetings, which are broken up into different content. And they're also provided a written guide that goes into even more details. But part of the pre-departure sessions are really to get students to think a bit more critically about risk and their own scenarios. We have set scenarios that we ask them to review in small groups, and then we discuss, in addition to, you know, all of the other practical travel information. And we advise them about how to use their CISI insurance, the FSU emergency support provided, and the expectations related to responding to our communications when emergencies may arise, if we need to communicate or do a safety check-in. And also explaining about our Crisis 24 now, using that as a resource for them before they go abroad, for, you know, really in making sure they're educating themselves about where they're going as much as possible. So that's a great resource for them as well. And then there's also the side travel registration process that is a centralized side travel registration that students are expected to do when they're traveling away from their exchange host city. And then even though this is a relatively small number of students, we have on average around 80 to 100 students in an academic year participating on exchanges. There's a lot of one-on-one advising that also is going on before they go abroad. So they're typically meeting with the Global Exchange Advisor. Caitlin Reichert is in that role, and or myself, to talk about the particulars of the location they're going to, the application process, whatever issues are coming up before they go. We also have smaller group meetings for students that go to more detailed application processes. Our partner at Waseda University has document upon document that they review and that we help them with before departure. So then while they're abroad, upon their arrival, they are expected to report their local address and information, physical address, including phone number and WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever other methods. And those are really important for making sure that we can communicate to them or check in if needed, particularly as we all know, emails can often go unnoticed. So that is an expectation. They report that in our application portal that is Global Exchanges portal. So they're very familiar because they work in that portal throughout the whole process of their exchange. And then also when they arrive, we check with the counterparts of us at our exchange partner university in the international office, and there's a formal request that goes to them to confirm their arrival and their enrollment in classes. They're also at that time asked to complete a quick survey to update us about their emergency information. As Cindy mentioned in the agreement, we of course start with that, but in case there are any changes to contacts or more immediate updates they want us to know, they will complete that as part of that process. And then our advisor, Global Exchanges advisor, will do a check-in with our students kind of midway through, depending on the timeline of their exchange, just to see how things are going, or if there are issues, we'll jump on a Zoom with them just to talk it over. And then we also have students enrolled in a formative experience course that gives us some ongoing feedback about their experiences and adjusting and other that are maybe not directly related to risk, but can also help us identify, if there's some issues, with what they're going through. So we wanted to point that out. And then finally, when they return, of course, they're giving us feedback on a formal survey, but they also have a one-on-one meeting with the Global Exchange advisor or myself, and they're given a reentry guide, printed resource to help them adjusting back. But those elements of getting the student feedback, so not only on a survey, but meeting with them, having a reentry workshop, hearing that feedback is important, tying back to our agreements process that Cindy mentioned, so that we can understand more on the ground what our students are experiencing at our partners. Really important, of course, for new partners where maybe we've only sent 1 or 2 students. And so that's kind of how we round out that process from applying to coming back home and providing them with support, and also knowing more about what they've experienced and what our partners are providing to them. And I think that's it from our slides.
Yes, thank you so much, Leanne. I am now going to pass it along to Chris Carroll and Tina in international programs. I'm sorry, bear with me. My computer is being a little sluggish in the advancement of slides, but there we go. And then I'm going to let them take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it. So first, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Tina Bourne. I'm the Director of Risk and Emergency Management at International Programs, or IP. I've been there for about 11 years, but specifically in risk for about 6. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Carroll to introduce herself, but also to get started.
Hello, yes, thanks, Tina. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Carroll. I currently serve as the Program Director for Quality and Assessment, but I've worked really closely with the risk team for many years in a lot of different areas of international programs. I wanted to mention we do have a Program Manager for Risk, Brianna Raquis, who is unable to be with us today, but I want to mention her because she is the one who assists Tina with a lot of the work that we'll be talking about today. And I think it's worth mentioning, I'm pretty sure most of you and I are well aware that FSU has 3 European Study Centers and a branch campus in Panama. For the purposes of this presentation and due to time, we thought we'd focus actually on the life cycle of our risk approach to our non-study center programs and the faculty led. Of course, we have emergency plans, quite a lot of procedures that go into running our branch campus and our study centers. But what you may not be as familiar with, except for the few of you that have been program leaders for us at non-study centers, is the amount of risk work it takes for these. You could imagine, since they're not at a study center, they don't operate full year round. We don't have permanent staff in these locations, that the risk exposure and our duty of care for these particular programs are really unique and high level. So we thought that's what we would focus on for this presentation. Of course, if anyone ever has any questions about our risk approach to anything that we do in international programs, we're always available and happy to discuss it. So I think one of the biggest questions we get, a really critical starting point of any faculty-led program in a non-study center, is the application process. And sometimes we get some kind of surprised looks from faculty when we tell them we need to be working on this 18 to 24 months in advance for a new program, a new location, not our programs that have been established, but someplace in a new location that we haven't operated before. And those of us at risk are really, I think, probably even think that's not long enough. But we have, when we get to the point where we're actually advertising a program and we're recruiting students, we need to know, we need to be absolutely confident that the program that we're offering is met all of the safety criteria. We've done everything we can to mitigate risks, and we're really confident that it's a safe program for our students. So we do start all of our application processes open. So for example, for summer, starting with summer 26, we will open our applications November of this year, 24. And the first meeting really we have with new program leaders, new faculty that want to go to a new location, is in December. So we'll be talking about 2026 programs this coming December. And one of the things that we do is we review job responsibilities and policies, and we have a program leader policy guide, and we go over that in this initial meeting with risk. It's our program management team and specifically our risk team who've done some advanced work on the location, and we go over the activities that the students will be doing. We will make sure they understand that we won't have people on the ground to help them. The responsibility of our faculty leaders on these programs is really high level. They not only the instructors and in charge of all the academic content, but they are the pastoral care leader for these students. And so sometimes this is it. Faculty members, understandably, once they have this meeting, decide, yeah, we'll go to a study center maybe. We'd rather not operate on our own. We do do a full risk review, but we also, you see all those acronyms there for resources. We do utilize quite a lot of intelligence when we are looking at our risk review. But of course, we know students have really unique risk. And so when we're reading this intelligence, often it's really meant for professional travelers or legislative travelers, and they're not necessarily looking at all the risks that our students will be meeting. So we'll talk to analysts, we'll talk to, Pulse International that Ashley mentioned before, making sure we really understand the activities and the impact of those activities with our students. And so maybe a program goes forward, but we say, yeah, you can't take them whitewater rafting because that's going to be super high risk, and we can't do that, but we can make the rest of your program work. And I just want to mention, of course, the risk element is just part of the approval process for our new programs. We do have academic review. In fact, we had a great meeting this morning with our oversight committee on that. Of course, we have immigration, and there's a lot that goes into that application review before we decide to move forward with the new program. So the next step is program creation and training. So this is all pre-departure, before we would send students abroad. We know, and I think all of us know who work with students a lot, that we need a lot of touch points with our students in order for the information to really get communicated. So we utilize a lot of different places to talk about and discuss risk information, safety information. One of the first places are Canvas modules. We require all of our students to participate in Canvas modules, and it's very much an overview of risk and safety. Best practices could apply to any location. We do pre-departure orientations then that are very specific to the location that they're going. We'll go over any particular high-risk activities. We, of course, also have waivers that detail all of that information, and they are often specific to the program depending on the risks that are associated. We do have a student-facing packet of information that covers many things, including risk and safety elements. And finally, we have an internal document that we develop with program leaders and any partners we may have on the ground that is the emergency plan. And so that's something that we don't distribute specifically to students, but of course, Tina will talk about how we cover that on site with students when they arrive in country. We try to spend a lot of time with our faculty, but we know their time is precious. So one of the things that we do is we require a faculty orientation. And in that orientation, we cover many things. We do scenarios, we cover insurance. We also debrief on hot topics, trends we saw the year before, things we might anticipate. So for example, this summer, the Olympics in Paris, any elevations in terrorism ratings or ratings from the Department of State, anything that we anticipate, heat waves, those kind of things that we anticipate might be happening, we will discuss at this orientation, and we'll even have one-on-one meetings with new program leaders as well. Student support, of course, I just again mentioned there's a lot more than just the risk and safety stuff that we cover with students pre-departure. So I think, Tina, you're going to talk about the next phase in the cycle.
Thanks, Dr. Carroll. So the next phase is what we do for the on-ground support. Ashley, I think you probably clicked it, but it's maybe delayed. There we go. Okay. So one of the things for on-ground support is that at IP, we have a policy that we won't send a faculty by themselves, right? I think that's probably a really good policy to have, but we always send them with a second. So that could look like a second faculty member, but we may also work with a partner university or third-party provider on the ground that's very accustomed to receiving student groups. For example, if we have a student who's ill or injured and needs to go to the hospital, someone should accompany them to the hospital, but we have now this backup, right? We have someone who can assist the rest of the students still on the program. But part of the on-ground is going to look like is our faculty member, they've been trained to provide on-site orientation. That's where they're going to review the emergency plan that we created before departure. And they're also going to provide the students with their emergency cards. And those cards are actually providing all students with our resources, CISI, but it also is their direct phone number. So going back to that pastoral care, right? Everything comes back to that faculty member. We also have an emergency on-call team. So of course, Dr. Carroll and myself are members of this team, but we also have 6 other IP members who are trained every year to help us on this team. We do rotate, but we always have 2 members always on call, so that if a call comes in from a faculty member and you happen to be in the shower, it's okay. There's somebody else who's also available. But this on call, we're really there to help support our faculty, and like I said, in case of emergencies, but that could look like talking through an incident. It could be walking through what are next steps, policies, procedures. Any way we can support or facilitate them, even though we're back here in Tallahassee, could be opening a ticket up with CISI resources, contacting emergency contact for our students, so on and so forth. But our on-call team, we're also going to be monitoring for what we call these world events or incidents abroad that could be impacting our travelers, whether on a program or independent travel. So we could be checking their locations or even asking them to check in with us while they're abroad. Which actually brings me to the independent travel report. So just like CGE, we do ask our students to report any travel away from their host city. Just like what Ashley said, we're not trying to be Big Brother. We're hopefully reassuring them that we're just using it for emergencies. So if there is an incident abroad, we know not only how to get in contact with them, we know where they are, but also it could be a situation where maybe they're not there yet, but they're going to be traveling there. And that's also really vital for us to know. You've heard already CISI resources. Obviously very useful if we have an injury or illness, medical or security evacuation, but there are actually really great mental health resources through CISI as well. Many of you probably already know that U.S. providers aren't able to continue to care for patients who are abroad. That's due to licensing restrictions. So obviously having these resources through CISI is very vital. So they do have a network of in-person English-speaking providers. If a provider isn't available in a certain location, we do have online resources as well. So Zoom counseling services that are offered, which kind of meets the student where they are, because I think they kind of prefer online to in-person, even if an in-person provider is available. And then lastly, CISI has a 24/7, 365 behavioral health emergency line. So that is also a really great resource that our students can utilize, and they have that number on their CISI card. And then finally, we have the Crisis 24 registry. So of course, our program locations and dates are fed into the travel registry, but so is our independent travel form. So we know where students are. We're going to be getting those alerts from Crisis 24 to our on-call team. So it's just one more tool for us to utilize for our students abroad. And then Ashley, if you don't mind going to the next one. So the last step is our post program. So our on-call team, the 8 of us will get together and we'll review the cases that occurred throughout our time. It's obviously a really wonderful way for us to improve as responders and lessons learned, but it is vital for identifying trends and mitigation moving forward. The same with our faculty. We will debrief with them individually as a program to figure out not only health, safety, and security, what went well, what didn't, but we evaluate everything, go through the whole program. So you'll see here like housing, excursions. A really big topic right now is student conduct and resiliency, especially post-pandemic. What can we improve, what went well, what didn't? How can we better support the students and staff while they're abroad? Program evaluation, so you're seeing a lot of the same as CGE. This is on top of the evaluations that we do for classes and academics. This is specific to their program. So these are some like examples of questions, but we can and we do make it very specific to the student's program. So again, we'll ask them, and this is anonymous. So hopefully they are, going through this evaluation, giving us really vital information for, again, improving going forward. And then as Dr. Carroll mentioned, when we first get a proposed program, we're going through this risk review and utilizing all of these resources, but this happens every year. Of course, as you all know, risk changes, safety and security concerns will change. And so we will take a look at it every single year, and we'll take the information that we learned from those debriefs and those evaluations and reincorporate it into our pre-departure orientations, packets, and waivers to make sure that our students feel prepared. And then, of course, we'll incorporate it back into our faculty training as well. So faculty receive training every single year. So we will hit on what's new, what's trending right now. We'll do tabletops or scenarios. So yeah, it's just, again, making sure that they feel prepared for their job ahead. But yeah, that's it from international programs.
Thank you so much, Tina. Let me see if I can get my computer to advance the slide. The next group we were going to talk about are our other students, right? What happens when there's student travel and they're not going through our global exchanges, or if they're not going through international programs? I work very closely with this population, so I just wanted to debunk a few myths. When we're talking about other student travel, I don't particularly care if they're funded, not funded. It could be for credit, it could be not for credit. We really look to register and enroll in kind of our travel registry process any student who is going abroad and representing FSU. I think it's also important to debunk that it's any student, right? So if you're working with a graduate assistant who maybe has booked through Concur or is looking to have a travel request through Concur, they must first comply with the student policy and get their travel approved through my process. So any student, for credit, not for credit, funded, not funded, really anyone going to represent FSU abroad. This often looks like individuals who are going to present at conferences, maybe international researchers, field work, internships. It can definitely look a variety of way. We have a travel request that's detailed in the policy, and it's also on that website for student travel that was linked earlier in the slides. We ask that students start that process at least 4 to 6 weeks in advance and prior to making any financial commitments to travel. The reason we do that is we take their health, safety, and security very seriously. And in the event that they're looking to go to a location, especially if it's higher risk in a level 3 or a level 4 location, level 4 is not approved, but in a level 3, or if they're doing an activity we feel is too risky, and we route it through our International Travel Oversight Committee. They decide it's not a risk, to educational reward, it's not approved. FSU isn't going to come back and reimburse the student if they already bought a flight ticket or if they already paid a program fee. So super important that they do that 4 to 6 weeks in advance of departure or in advance of any necessary payments. The process to review the activity, like I mentioned, it's based very comprehensively. What are the students doing? Is that a sensitive thing to be doing in that country? For example, if they're doing gender research in a country that maybe isn't as progressive with gender fluidity, and that's what they want to hone in on. Are they going to, an area of concern? Is it a level 3 area within the country, or are they in a part of a city that maybe isn't as safe? I resource and analyze this using many of the same tools we've already talked about today, the Department of State, OSAC, CDC, all these great locations that have information to see if the student's trying to do something that's considered high risk. If it is high risk, sometimes I'll go back to the student and say, did you notice or did you know? Have you thought of the risk of going to this location? Can you change your travel plans? I'll sometimes work with them to come up with ways they can mitigate the risk. But ultimately, if it is considered any sort of high risk activity or location, it is sent to our International Travel Oversight Committee for review. That committee is, again, university-wide. There are representations from Student Affairs, the Provost Office. We have many of you today sit on that committee. They review the request by the student and then ultimately determine, again, if it's something that FSU can approve. If it's not approved, it also goes up through the provost, just to make sure, that we are working in compliance with kind of all considerations of FSU's reputational risk, as well as just the health and safety of our travelers. So there is a process there. In the event that someone goes to the International Travel Oversight Committee and that student is approved to travel, maybe they've, understood all the risks and really been able to, explain in their request the steps they're going to take to mitigate that risk. We all give those students, they will all receive a high risk waiver. Again, I work with, kind of general counsel and Robert Large in the Office of Compliance and Ethics to make sure that details the risks we discussed, the student signs off on it. It's another opportunity to, ensure that they understand the location that they're going to and any steps they may take to mitigate the risk. There's never a guarantee of a risk-free experience. I wish I could say there was, but we really take this approach of being risk aware, if possible, while maintaining that student's health safety as our top priority. So if you're working with any students that are going abroad and not through international programs or the Center for Global Engagement, please get to them very early into the process. Get them to me so I can help them through this travel request. The other population I work very close with, and this is kind of developing, but there are pockets at the university of group travel that is FSU faculty and staff organized. So again, going back to our policy, that's our highest level of duty of care and due diligence, but they're not credit bearing. So the individuals that are not working with international programs or not doing a faculty led, I've given a few examples, but the men's basketball team doing a tour in Canada. Music recently went to Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. These kind of groups that travel. Ireland, I'm sure you've all thought about Ireland, the football team going to Ireland. It's super important to get that to me as well. If you're working in any department that knows of this kind of travel, I have a process of, again, researching and analyzing the risks that are present or maybe posed to our travelers, compiling that, asking questions about transportation, how is accommodation, are we doing this with a trusted partner? In some cases, like we have an honors group that goes every summer, spring to Oxford. Oxford is hosting our students. We trust Oxford University, they host them on campus. That's easy to do time and time again. Or is it really like an FSU faculty member that's booking a hotel kind of remotely from here in the US? So I go through all that information with them to, again, ensure that these groups that are going, even if they're not going through international programs or the Center for Global Engagement, get the same support and services, and that we can try to keep our travelers, as safe as possible, right? So it's super important to reach out early if you have anyone or if you know of any other faculty. Student organizations is one that tend to be kind of that more organized. If an RSO is going abroad and the students are leading it, then it's independent student travel. But anytime there's really an FSU faculty or staff member involved in organizing the trip, please do not hesitate to send it over and send it over early. That way we can get them through the process of review. And of course, then the trade-off is they get the same CISI insurance and the Crisis 24 intel alerts that we've been talking about with all of our travelers. So it is really good to get those, people in touch with me early on. I believe that concludes all of our information for you today. So Steve, I don't know if you want to take it into a bit of, questions and discussions.